Right. Just loading now.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. And welcome to this October Development Management North. And I hope you're all plugged in and ready, and we'll get going immediately. Before I start the meeting, though, do we have to go through the usual legal department? Do you need to go through this, or are we all familiar now?
Oh, yes, please, Chairman, if I may, just read this out quickly. Brief reminder, councillors, of procedures during the meeting. Could you please make sure your mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent if they're in close proximity to you?
Can you just hold on a second? Can everybody hear?
Can everyone hear?
Andy, you're very muffled at the moment. We can hear the words, but you're quite muffled.
It's very faint.
I will, I think if I move nearer my screen, hopefully you'll be able to hear me better. Is that better? Yes? No. Is that better?
Yes, it is a bit better. Yes, thank you.
Good. Everyone's responsible for managing their own microphone by keeping it mute unless you unmute to speak. And this includes any roll call vote. And following the presentations and member discussions, members will be asked to vote on each item. The roll call vote is called alphabetically so as to make it as smooth as possible. And please could members be poised in readiness to be called and unmute your microphone before you vote and mute yourself again afterwards. And when you wish to speak, you will need to press the blue raised hand icon. And to find that, please click on the participants icon found in the Zoom toolbar. If you've got an iPad, it's at the top. And if you've got a PC or laptop, it's at the bottom of the screen. And the list of participants will also appear down one side of the screen. And those with raised hands will move to the top of the list in the order that they are pressed. Now, there may be technical issues with connectivity, which means that you leave the meeting unintentionally. Sorry. Unfortunately, if this is the case, you will have to abstain on the item that you missed. This is quite important, that you missed a part of. So to re-enter the meeting, use the Zoom invitation link. If a councillor has an interest and doesn't wish to attend part of the meeting, the hosting officer will put them in a waiting room and return them to the meeting when the item is finished. Now, the meeting is live streamed and you will be seen and heard by members of the public. What we have noticed when watching these Zoom meetings is that it will actually zoom on you when you're not speaking. So be prepared to be zoomed in on by YouTube at any time and act accordingly. There is the sort of short delay before the live streaming ends as well. So be on your best behaviour until the absolute end. Some members of the public are making representations by video recording, and these will be played at the relevant time. And members of the public or parish council representatives wishing to participate in the meeting will be held in a waiting room by the host until it is their turn to speak. So we will now proceed with the meeting, and obviously any procedural advice will be given as the meeting proceeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Right, we'll make a start. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Colin Minto and also Councillor Tony Hogben, because he can only attend for a part of the meeting.
Right, is Tony Hogben here now, or has he sent his apologies for the whole meeting? Are you there, Tony? Right.
I think
he sent his apologies for the whole meeting.
Yes, he'll try and come if he can, but he sent his apologies.
Right, you've been circulated the minutes of the last meeting. Can they be taken as a correct record? You all in agreement? Yes, that's fine. Do any members have any declarations of interest? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. I have an interest under item 6. I'm a season ticket holder at Horsham Football Club, and I won't be partaking in this part of the meeting tonight.
Very good of you to join us at the beginning then. Thank you for that. Any other declarations of interest?
Yes, I have.
Councillor.
My husband is a member of the football club, so I won't be participating in item 6.
Right. Any others? Okay, so I have no announcements. I'm not sure if the head of development has any. Right, so we'll move straight on. Appeals, as usual, are just for noting, unless there were any urgent comments. In that case, we will move straight on to the Horsham Football Club, agenda item 6. And there is one speaker for this item who will be called at the end of the officer's announcement.
Liz, can you make me a co-host, please? Sorry, Liz. Sorry, Liz. Okay, shall I go?
When you're ready.
Okay, right. Good afternoon, everybody. Just bear with me a sec. Right, hopefully you can all see that. So this first item is for the Horsham Football Club, now known as the Camping World Community Stadium. Here we have the application site located to the south of Horsham within Southwater Parish to the east of Worthing Road. This shows the layout of the facility, which has now been completed at the entrance off Worthing Road, its main pitch and training pitch with a clubhouse and parking. And you can see the site surrounded by the woodland, which includes ancient woodland. Here's the site in the context of the surrounding area with Hoppost facility to the west. And here I've highlighted the nearest residential properties. So you have Den Park to the northeast, which is approximately 400 metres. And you have Gate Cottage to the northeast with its large garden, which stretches south. That's approximately 200 metres from the site. And you have 3 properties to the south there, which I've just highlighted. As I said, the facility is now completed and did successfully host matches before the lockdown. Here we see the main pitch in nice sunny weather, and you can see the back of the clubhouse and the spectator stand. And this shows the floodlights as constructed around the main pitch. And here we have the view from the main spectator stadium. Stand, sorry. And here we have the view from the front of the clubhouse with the parking. And proposal is retrospective to retain a number of minor alterations that have been implemented to the original scheme since it was completed. And one of the amendments is to regularize the appearance of the clubhouse as shown here. The scheme also includes retention of 2 turnstiles, which are shown here in black, which are either side of the clubhouse, and a storage shed, which is located between the main pitch and training pitch. The details of the amendments are all outlined in the reports. The proposal also includes retention of a container and a cabin, which are used for storage, which are also between the main and training pitch, which you can see here. And the scheme also includes 2 spectator stands, which you can see here, and new entering gates to be retained. And here you can see the amendments to the clubhouse, which are very minor amendments to its appearance. Could argue that the main alteration is the retention of 8 floodlights to the main pitch. So I've highlighted the floodlights here with red arrows to the 4 to the training pitch and 8 to the main pitch, which are all 15 meters high. As approved, 6 floodlights were approved to the main pitch. So 8 were installed, with the addition of two floodlights. As outlined in the reports, technical data has been submitted, which show that the 8 floodlights will result in less light spill than the 6-column layout. And our environmental health officer commented that the lighting assessment has been received and found reviewed and found to be satisfactory with regard to expected light levels, light spill and glare. As such, the floodlights is considered appropriate, and overall the proposal with the minor amendments is acceptable in terms of its amenity impacts and all other material planning considerations. Members should note that as a result of this application, concerns from adjacent residents have been received as outlined in the reports, which mainly relate to the floodlighting. To help address these concerns, we've initiated residents' liaison meetings between the football club and residents. And the first meeting was a couple of months ago, and that was successful. And we're due to have another one in November, where we'll be looking at additional screening to help mitigate the impact of the floodlighting. These meetings will continue at regular intervals to keep a continuing dialogue between the club and its neighbours. So as I said, the scheme as put forward is considered acceptable, subject to conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much for that, Jason. We have one speaker on this, Nigel Langridge, who is by video.
Good evening. Residents neighbouring the new football ground have been significantly impacted by the arrival of the club by both light and noise pollution. Loss of amenity has been forced on local residents by this development. We are seeking the inclusion of 2 conditions to any approval of this application that will mitigate these issues through planting evergreen screening on both sides of the ground and the use of partial pitch illumination during training sessions, as per guidance from the Football Association. The glare from the floodlights is extremely bright, and for a number of residents, it shines into their homes. Prior to lockdown, this was up to 6 times a week throughout the evening. This has also detrimentally impacted the nocturnal wildlife present in this rural setting. FA guidance is for partial pitch illumination during training sessions. This must surely make financial sense for the club, as well as for their carbon footprint. As pointed out by the FA, it also goes a long way towards limiting the impact of the club on their neighbours and wildlife. Residents complain they are forced to shut windows when the ground is in use and can no longer let their children play in the gardens due to the swearing that can be heard from the ground. In order to mitigate the impact of both noise and glare from the battery of lights, we think it not unreasonable to ask for the planting of fit-for-purpose screening on both sides of the ground. The golf course planted Leylandii. Although not a tree of ecological choice, it is fast-growing, dense and evergreen, meaning it will create an effective screen during the dark winter months of the football season when the leaves have fallen from deciduous trees. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Planning Officer, did you have anything you wanted to, any comments you want to make before I bring the local members in?
Thanks, Liz. So we have some landscaping which has been agreed, which will be implemented, and that's a condition. And we did discuss the additional landscaping at the residents' meeting. The problem is, at the moment, the site is so covered with trees, it's hard to assess where the trees should go. So that's why we decided that we'd look back at it later on at the residents' meeting when the leaves start falling, we can make a better judgment of where trees would be best served. And also it's difficult at this stage just to really highlight or to know whether that screening will make a difference. And we need to agree what kind of tree. As I said, Leylandii is an option, but that's not necessarily the best option. And also I discussed this additional condition with the football club. And the problem is that some of the landscaping may have to go in land which they don't own. So that would be to the golf club. So I think in that terms, in that respect, it wouldn't be reasonable to impose an additional condition for works which are outside their ownership. So and also the condition is not required to make this scheme acceptable in planning terms. As I said, the scheme as put forward before you is acceptable in terms of its impact amenity, and it's been assessed from the environmental health officers and in terms of the lighting assessments. So as I said, we've got these residents' meetings, and we are going to be looking at the additional screening. So that is something which the football club has committed to. And yeah, so then when we'll be in a better place then to know whether the screening will be effective, what kind of trees and where it should go, and whether the football club needs to get the permission of the golf club to put the screening in place. So in terms of ecology, that's been assessed, and ecology has accepted the floodlighting. There has been an ecology statement, and there is an ongoing assessment of that, which is part of their agreement. So there is a condition to make sure that we comply with that. And with the partial illumination, the football club has agreed to turn off the lights as soon as they're not used. And we did look at dimming them, but they've said it's not like a domestic switch. You can't just dim the floodlights like you would with normal lights. But again, that is something which we'll be looking at further in the forthcoming residents meetings. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, and congratulations on setting up a liaison group. I often think that makes planning a lot smoother from all sides, so well done doing that beforehand. Councillor Claire Vickers, I believe you were wanting to speak first.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to start by thanking Jason Hawkes for his full report and for his presentation, and for organising a site visit, socially distanced, of course, with the residents on one occasion and at the football club. And I'd like to congratulate the football club for providing such an amazing facility, which is of huge asset to the community. However, I'm sorry that these applications before us are retrospective ones. That's always very infuriating, and I know members agree. I too welcome setting up the liaison group, because the residents and the football club need to learn to live next to each other. I do share some of the concerns of the residents from the lighting perspective. I understand officers are telling us that the 8 lights are better than the 6 that were approved. However, the experience of residents is that they do suffer from glare. I hear what they say about putting a landscaping condition on to help mitigate that. If that can't be done, can an informative be added to the approval to ensure that that discussion does continue? And I do welcome the liaison group. I think it's very helpful. There is an hours of operation of the lighting. Is there a restriction on when the lights must go off?
Yes, there is a condition that the floodlighting not to be used beyond 10:30 p.m. In the evening, Monday to Friday, and 6 p.m. on a Saturday and Sunday. So that is in line with the original condition and fits in with the use of the training and main pitches.
So I'm not suggesting for a moment that we don't agree the officer's recommendation to approve, but I would like an informative so that the football club is aware that they have agreed to do the landscaping. And I do agree that it's probably not the right time to agree where that should go. And we need to have some trees that are not deciduous, that are evergreen. Whether conifers are the right thing or not, I know they're fast growing, but whether they're appropriate. But I would like to see additional screening in situ. So on the basis of an informative and continued liaison between the football club and the residents, I will agree with the officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Billy Greening.
Yeah, I mostly agree with Claire. I said most of what I was going to say when this application came before us 3 years ago, and I'm really proud that I supported the football club then. I've got no reason to disbelieve the residents, and just congratulate Jason on setting up the liaison group, which I think is the best way forward. I would happily support an informative on the application, and hope that the football club and the residents can continue to work together for successful resolutions where necessary.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tricia Utan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My only comment really is regarding the fact that it's taken, or it still hasn't been decided where to plant additional trees, because I would have thought that there should be enough knowledge about which trees are going to lose their leaves. So consequently, with that knowledge, it should have been surely quite easy to establish where either leylandi or indeed laurel go, because they're both fast growing. So I just wonder why that wasn't sort of thought about really.
Yeah, if I can come in, I mean, there is a lot of trees on this site. I mean, that would be very difficult to work out. And so that's why, and also you have to judge it in the distance of the houses. So currently, if you're on the site, you can't even see the houses that are affected because there are so many trees. So that is a very difficult thing to work out at the moment. So that's why we decided to go back and have a look at it when there's less trees on the leaves, when it's going to be, and when it's darker, so we can turn the lights on, and then you can potentially go inside the houses, and then you can make more of a better assessment at that stage.
All right. Councillor Christine Costin.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm absolutely pleased that the football club is now up and running. It's taken a long time. A little bit disappointing that we're having to look at retrospective ideas, but most of them seem quite reasonable. The planting of trees is very important, but Leylandite always ends up causing a nightmare of problems with their roots, and they just grow and grow. So yes, that landscaping is very important to get it right. And I hope that the golf club will work with the football club and the council to help with that. If the trees have really got to go on their land. But overall, I mean, I think, yes, it's looking good, but the selection of trees, there must be more than Leyland. Everyone thinks they're the fastest. There must be other evergreen trees that will do the job just as well.
Councillor Ruth Fletcher.
Thank you. Just very quickly to say it's really disappointing that after the football club has relied so heavily on the council for assistance with the relocation and getting this fantastic new facility up and running, that we're seeing a retrospective application here. It's really disappointing, and I hope that the officers in their liaison group will be discussing that matter. Thank you.
Right, well, I don't seem to have any more speakers. I thought there was one, but it's disappeared again. So can we, it strikes me that there's general agreement, but can we go through the usual way of voting, please?
Can you just clarify that an informative will be added if this is approved, please?
Jason Hawkes, yeah,
Yes, I can confirm that. Yeah, we will add that informative as suggested by the councillor.
Thank you.
Are you happy with that, local members, both of you?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right, Liz, when you're ready.
Right, okay, and this is for the recommendation to approve planning commission subject to appropriate conditions.
And can I just remind members to put their unmute just before your name's going to be called. Right, when you're ready.
Right. Councillor Allen. Oh no, sorry, I beg your pardon, he's not there. I do apologise. Councillor Baldwin.
Agree.
Councillor Bevis.
Agree.
Councillor Bradnam.
Agree.
Councillor Britton.
Agreed.
Councillor Karen Burgess.
Agree.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
Agree.
Councillor Cornell.
Agreed.
Councillor Costin.
Agree.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Donnelly? He's muted. Councillor Fletcher.
Agreed.
Councillor Greening.
Agree.
Councillor Haig.
Agree.
Councillor Kitchen.
Agreed.
Councillor Landernew.
Agreed.
Councillor Lindsay.
Agreed.
Councillor Milne.
Agreed.
Councillor Mitchell.
Agreed.
Councillor Newman.
Agreed.
Councillor Potter.
Agreed.
Councillor Ritchie.
Agreed.
Councillor Skip.
Agreed.
Councillor Stannard.
Agreed.
Councillor Vickers.
Agreed.
Councillor Utan.
Agree.
And Councillor Donnelly. Well, that's those who voted, it's unanimous. It was 23 in favour of the recommendation to approve.
with the extra put in by Councillor and Councillor Greening. Right, thank you very much indeed. That's done. We'll now move on to item 07, which is Ridgehurst Drive, Horsham, and there will be 2 speakers after the presentation on this. So I'm not sure who's presenting. Is it Amy? Which officer is presenting this one?
Yes, it's Amy.
Amy, I thought it was. When you're ready, Amy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this application seeks the demolition of an existing bungalow on the site and associated outbuilding and the construction of 5 terraced 2-bedroom houses with 6 car parking spaces. So the application site is located to the north of Ridgehurst Drive within the designated built-up area of Horsham. Ridgehurst Drive is a cul-de-sac accessed off Hills Farm Lane. The site is located within an area defined by relatively dense suburban residential development comprising predominantly terraces, terrace dwellings with some examples of detached and semi-detached dwellings within the cul-de-sac. 2-bedroom houses with 6 car parking spaces. So the application site is located to the north of Ridgehurst Drive within the designated built-up area of Horsham. Ridgehurst Drive is a cul-de-sac accessed on Hills Lane.
We've got some feedback here and a delay, so we'll just continue.
Okay. So the existing property on the site is a 3-bedroom detached bungalow set at some distance from the road. To the east of the site is a terrace of 6 properties with a detached property sited to the west and the bungalow to the north. The property to the north is accessed via shared access, as seen there. Shared access with the application site off Ridgehurst Drive. The site benefits from existing parking to the rear with space available for 4 or 5 vehicles. So the proposed terrace of 5 properties would be located to the south of the site, closer to Ridgehurst Terrace than the existing bungalow, and would be positioned along a staggered build line with plot 5 located in line with the adjacent property to the west. The existing shared access located to the west of the site would be utilised, leading to communal parking area, providing a total of 6 vehicle parking spaces. Minimum distances of approximately 26.3.
Wrong, but from my experience,
5.3 and 5.9 metres would be maintained to the closest neighbouring properties to the north, east and west. So the proposed dwellings would extend over 2 storeys with overhanging porch projections to the frontages. The proposed design of the terrace row has taken cues from the neighbouring properties with a similar materials palette proposed to be used. The proposals have been amended with the removal of a number of windows to the west-facing elevation of plot 1 to limit overlooking of the garden of the neighbouring property. Each dwelling would facilitate the creation of a living room, dining room at the rear of the property, a kitchen at the front and WC facilities at ground floor level, and 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms at first floor level. So just showing some photos to the site. The top left-hand photo shows the neighbouring terrace, which the proposal has taken its design cues from, with the top right-hand photo showing the site from Ridgehurst Drive with the existing terrace of properties in the distance, as can be seen in the location of the arrow. The bottom left-hand photo again shows the site from Ridgehurst Drive with the end terrace property in the foreground of the photo and the bungalow seen in that location there. The bottom right-hand photo is taken from the parking area with the outbuilding to be removed, seen this location here, and the garage of the existing bungalow seen here, and this is the view back towards Ridgehurst Drive. So the top left-hand photo again is the parking area looking on towards the properties at the rear on the hillside, with the top right-hand photo being the bungalow to the rear of the site, which shares the access of Ridgehurst Drive. The bottom left-hand photo is the relationship with the property at the end terrace property, with the bottom right-hand photo showing the neighbouring properties to the west of the site, the outbuilding to be removed, and then the end of the garage of the existing property. So Den Neighbourhood Council have objected to the application, as have 11 local residents who have raised concerns in respect of the overdevelopment of the site, the proposal being out of keeping with the street scene, loss of privacy and amenity to neighbouring residents, the access being inappropriate, along with the loss of wildlife and landscaping. No objections have been received to the proposal by West Sussex County Council Highways, Southern Water or the council's drainage engineer. The site is located within the built-up area of Horsham, where the principle of residential development is considered acceptable, subject to all other material planning considerations. The area is characterised by relatively dense suburban residential development comprising primarily two-storey terrace properties, but there are examples of semi-detached and detached properties within the cul-de-sac. Officers consider that the proposed row of terrace dwellings is appropriately sized and would sit comfortably within the site, with appropriately sized gardens to the rear when compared to neighbouring properties. It's therefore considered that in this instance, the proposal would not represent an overdevelopment of the site or be out of keeping within the wider street scene. Appropriate distances would be preserved to neighbouring properties. The submitted site plan indicates that the development would provide 6 off-road parking spaces to the northeastern corner of the site, which accords with the West Sussex County Council residential parking calculator in relation to a development of this type and scale, which is 1.1 space for 2-bed properties in this area of Horsham. So therefore, in conclusion, the application is recommended for approval for the reasons as set out in the officer's report and subject to the conditions as set out at section 7. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right, we have 2 speakers on this. The first one is Darryl Jacobs, who is on video. When you're ready, Liz.
Good evening. Hopefully you will all have read our detailed submissions on the Council Planning website. We believe that this is first and foremost a project designed to maximise profit for the developer. There has been little consideration given to existing residents who will be greatly disrupted if this plan goes ahead. Firstly by the build itself, and then the ongoing parking and noise issues that would result from this overdevelopment of a relatively small plot of land. There is an opportunity here to produce something much better. I would like to see 2 larger houses built, in keeping with those to the west of the plot, with integral garages and parking to the front of the properties. This would present a pleasing curbside appearance opposite the trees and grassy slope leading down to the river. The rear communal areas could then, instead of being turned into cramped parking spaces, be landscaped to provide a natural outlook for the benefit of all residents. So to summarise our objections. Number 1, this is considerable overdevelopment. 2, our entitlement to privacy, peace and quiet will be disrupted by noise pollution and disturbance. 3, we will be overlooked. 4, the increased use of the private drive and the inevitable additional on-street parking that will occur on Ridgehurst Drive will be hazardous to other road users, as there is a sharp bend only 40 metres away. I therefore urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. The next speaker is Councillor Trudy Mitchell, who's appearing with us via Zoom. Good evening.
Hello, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right.
Yep.
Den Neighbourhood Council has no objection in principle to the development of this site, as the existing bungalow is an older building out of character with the Ridgehurst Drive estate, built in the 1980s. However, like the many residents who have responded, we strongly object to the current application to squeeze 5 houses onto the plot. Contrary to the case officer's report, we consider that this proposal is out of character and constitutes overdevelopment. There is a good mix of detached, semi-detached and terraced housing on this road, but because the estate was well designed, none of the terraced housing appears as cramped as that proposed. The estate was designed to discourage on-road parking. Some of the existing terraced housing is set back far enough from the road so that off-road parking is possible in front of the houses. There are also 4 very large off-road parking areas with allocated spaces. Secondly, the report gives no information about the topography of the site, and the difference in levels is not very apparent from the elevations submitted. In fact, the land rises quite steeply from the road up to 9 Ridgehurst Drive. It seems that part of this hillside will have to be dug out to make space for the new housing, and this means that the proposed houses are set much closer to the Ridgehurst Drive frontage than in the rest of the estate. Also, on the side of plot 5, which is adjacent to number 15, there is a steep change of levels necessitating several steps in the existing bungalow garden. This change in ground levels may explain why the proposed terrace has been pushed towards the private road boundary. The side wall of plot 1 abuts directly onto the private road. This makes it appear overbearing and gives the house no protection from vehicles. Thirdly, the private road was originally intended solely for vehicle access to numbers 9 and 11. There is also a pedestrian exit from number 72 Hillside, used by children with bicycles and dogs. This has not been mentioned. There is no footpath, and the private road is not wide enough for vehicles to pass each other. So if 2 vehicles meet, one will have to reverse back to the main road. We consider this drive would be unsafe access for the combined use of number 9 and 5 new houses. The vehicle tracking submitted only shows how it would work for private cars, but makes no mention of access for larger delivery or emergency vehicles. Residents, in particular from number 9, who have the most experience of the problems, have submitted information regarding the difficulties in using the private road because of poor sight lines, the camber and bends, not to mention winter weather conditions. West Sussex Highways have only done a desktop survey which would not show these problems. Requests were made to HDC for a site visit from Highways. However, the case officer considered it unnecessary. Parking has been provided for 6 vehicles only, which as usual meets minimum standards, but is unlikely to be sufficient. Any additional vehicles will be forced to park on Ridgehurst Drive, which bends at this point. It is also not very clear from the plans that what is described as amenity space in fact constitutes individual gardens. 4 of the houses have rear gates exiting onto the proposed parking area on the private road. This is the route that will have to be used to trundle refuse bins downhill to the main road in all weathers. There is no information of provision for bin storage or cycle parking or electric charging points. Likewise, there is no information on landscaping, which is important given the changes in ground levels. The existing plot has been described as a haven for wildlife. It also contains an orchard and there are trees forming a barrier between neighbouring properties. Will the trees be lost? Few people have objected to the redevelopment of the site per se, and most will be willing to see a couple of family homes on the plot. But the current proposal is unsuitable, out of character, and constitutes overdevelopment. Finally, I hope that the committee will refuse this application. Otherwise, we ask that the decision is deferred until West Sussex Highways undertakes a site visit, and we ask that the number of houses is reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's an awful lot in there to be answered, Amy, when you're ready.
I'll come back on some of the points made. There was quite a lot. So in terms of noise disturbance, recommended condition 4 requires a construction management plan to be submitted and agreed. So this would deal with things such as access arrangement, how noise and dust would be dealt with, where vehicles will park and the storage of materials. And condition 15 limits construction hours. In terms of car parking, West Sussex County Council, as you will see in the report, requires 1.1 space per dwelling for a 2-bedroom property in this location. So we've got 5 dwellings with 6 spaces, so that would meet the requirement. Whilst it is noted that, you know, people might actually have more than 1 car per house, it should be noted that there aren't any parking restrictions on Ridgehurst Drive, and therefore planning can't actually stop vehicles from parking on street. But like I say, the West Sussex County Council parking calculator is for 1.1 space per dwelling. In terms of the safety of the access onto Ridgehurst Drive, no concerns have been raised by West Sussex County Council, and whilst there might not be provision for large vehicles, deliveries and the likes are likely to be relatively infrequent, and therefore it's likely that they will use Ridgehurst Drive, which I imagine is the current situation with a lot of properties on the cul-de-sac. In terms of bin and cycle storage, there is conditions recommended, so that's conditions 12 and 13 requiring details to be submitted and agreed. And in terms of electric vehicle charging points, again, there is a recommended condition, that's condition 11 in the officer report. It was mentioned about private amenity spaces, so each property will have its own garden space to the rear, and there is a landscaping condition recommended, which will, I think, also include the requirement for boundary treatments to be agreed, so we can deal with whether or not that is going to be fenced or a communal space, but I imagine that it is, each property has an individual garden area. It was also mentioned about the levels, and we can include, if members found it necessary, to include a condition requiring existing and proposed ground levels and floor levels to be agreed. In terms of the overdevelopment and the proposal being out of keeping, officers do consider that the terrace has taken design cues from the adjoining terrace of properties, and it is acknowledged that there is a range of design and style of properties within the cul-de-sac, and therefore officers in this case don't consider it to be an overdevelopment or be out of keeping with Ridgehurst Drive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll bring in the 3 local members. I don't have any particular order, so shall I start with Councillor Francis Haig?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to start by thanking the officers for their work on this proposal. I have seen some of the complaints from residents and the various comments, and I know that they are concerned. However, we are in a situation where what we can allow or not allow at planning is quite limited. We do have a requirement for houses like this. The row of terraces that's proposed would fit in with the adjacent terrace, and I accept that. And it's very much that we need homes of this size for the young people living in our town. So I have asked for a condition that there should be protection between this development and the neighbours. And that is important. I recognise that there will be disruption during the building process, but I think once the development is in place, that it won't impact in the way that people are anticipating. So in that respect, I do support the officer's recommendation. I would like to see the condition on the levels that the officer has just proposed, and I would like to see that added to the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ruth Fletcher.
Thank you. The principle of replacing the bungalow with a terrace seems to be a very good one. It's in keeping with the rest of the estate, and it does meet the needs for local housing. So I don't have a problem with this in principle. What I find really frustrating about this is that we as a council are seeking good design, and yet we are recommending for approval a design which is going to inevitably lead to on-road parking. for all that it's been proved that you can get a car into and out of the proposed parking space without having to reverse and so on, in reality, people are going to want to park on the road. And at the moment, the road doesn't tend to suffer from a great deal of parking because other houses, as Councillor Mitchell says, have got suitable off-road parking. And there does seem to be more than enough space available for that to have been taken into consideration. So while West Sussex have concerned themselves with whether there's a serious problem with residual impact or highway safety, as a matter of good design, I'm very disappointed that we haven't sorted out this problem and got a layout of these terrace houses like the adjacent ones where there's space for off-road parking in a bay or similar, because it's bound to happen and then we'll get people parking on the pavement. Likewise, there's a condition that there should be cycle parking, but it's very hard to see how that cycle parking is going to meet the latest standards. It looks like it's just going to be a shed at the bottom of the garden, which is going to have very poor access for people because of the way the site's been laid out. So though there's plenty of space to do a good job on it, it looks like we're going to get something very half-hearted. So I'm really disappointed in that as an aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Belinda Walters.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in total agreement with my co-councillors. My view on it is that I'm equally disappointed that whilst the design of the houses is in keeping with the local housing, the car parking facilities are not in keeping with the local area. Each of the other blocks has its own parking arrangements so that they can keep their cars away from Ridgehurst Drive itself. And on that basis, I would have been delighted had only 4 houses been suggested with an area of space to put the cars actually off the Ridgehurst Drive. So I can equally understand where the officers are coming from. So I'm sort of struggling with this one really, because there is no, on the basis of what I've said, there's no basic reason to refuse. But I have to say I'm extremely unhappy by it. Thank you.
Amy, did you want to come back on any comments from the local members? I think you're muted.
Emma, we can't. Yeah, Emma, we can't hear you. Emma, we can't hear you.
Sorry, apologies. It's technology. In terms of the parking court element, it's not bad design having a parking court. So I think you'd be in a difficult position in planning terms to argue that a parking court is bad design. Ultimately, it provides sufficient parking, and the comments that have been made here are in terms of people's behaviours, and we can never condition for those, and you can't justify a refusal on that basis. And I think the difficulty in this instance is if you were to set the units back to enable off-street parking there, you potentially then have an impact on neighbours where you'd have the full depth of the house going beyond the sighting of the neighbours. So I think there's some good design reasons why in this instance a parking court has been chosen. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Christine Costin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I agree with what the 3 members have said. It's a very disappointing design because it's an opportunity to get the housing that we so desperately desire. But looking at it, it lacks imagination. It lacks the proper fitting in with what's already there, because it doesn't seem to do that properly. And the parking is definitely going to be a problem. Is there some way that it could sort of be deferred in order to get the local members to discuss with the applicant how the design could be improved?
Can I ask a planning officer to come in on that question?
My view, if it's to be deferred to provide some on-plot parking at the front of the properties, that would result in a significant redesign, and I don't think that can necessarily be something that can be amended within the current scheme. My advice is we need to determine the application before us.
Thank you for that. I don't seem to have any more speakers. So, Councillor Costin, were you going to put that as a proposal, or shall we just take a straight vote on this? Because it seems to me it's either got to be allowed or refused to move forward from the way I'm hearing it. You're shaking your head. Yeah.
No, I wasn't going to put it forward as a proposal. It was just an idea in my mind to somehow to try to improve it. That was basically the idea, but I think you're right. We'll probably have to vote on it as it is.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we will vote on the officer's sorry, was someone wanting to speak? No. We'll vote on the officer's recommendation as printed in the agenda. Liz, when you're ready.
Right. And before I start, Chairman, Councillor Brian Donnelly's had to leave the meeting. He asked me to let you know that he's now left, unfortunately, for another meeting.
Right, thank you.
Chairman, if I could just speak, if that's okay, just to remind members that we're asking with regard to the votes to actually answer for, against or abstain with regard to the recommendation. I think last time we somehow ended up saying the word agree, which is fine. We knew the intention, but just for true procedural correctness, just to remind us for, against or abstain. Thank you, Chairman.
We have to get it right, don't we? Thank you very much. All right, when you're ready.
Okay, to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
Against.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton.
For.
Councillor Burgess.
For.
Sorry, Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Cornell.
Against.
Councillor Costin.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Landrieu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Milne.
Abstain.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Skip.
Against.
Councillor Stannard.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Waters.
Regrettably, no, against.
Councillor Utan.
For.
Right, so that's 18 for, 6 against and 1 abstention, so the motion's carried.
Thank you for that. There was a mention actually of a condition. I hope the officers have taken that on board. I know it wasn't included in the voting, but you've understood where that was coming from. Right.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
All right, thank you very much. Right, so we'll now move on to agenda item number 8, and again we have speakers on this thing when the officers have finished their presentation. So whoever's presenting this, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this application seeks the construction of a 2-storey dwelling with associated off-street parking and hard and soft landscaping within the curtilage of Fieldfair on North East Heath Close. So the application site is located on the northern side of the private road at North Heath Close within the designated built-up area of Horsham. The site is located within a wider area defined by relatively dense suburban residential development with a mix of detached, semi-detached and terrace properties in the area. So North East Close consists of detached dwellings set within relatively modest sized plots. An area to the west of the property consists of mature soft landscaping, which is the location of the proposed additional dwelling, as can be seen outlined in red. The existing properties within North East Close sit within modest plots, with the properties to the west and southwest of the site located in very close proximity to their respective side boundaries. So the proposed new dwelling will be located within the side guarding area of Field Fair. It should be noted that a dwelling has previously been permitted within the curtilage of the property in 2001, but that permission was never implemented. A number of trees, as shown by the red stars, outside of the application site, but adjoining the site, are the subject of tree preservation order. So permission is sought for the construction of a 2-storey, 3-bedroom property located within the side garden area of Field Fair. The proposed dwelling would be positioned in line with Field Fair and the neighbouring property to the west known as Lady Mead. The proposed dwelling would be served by the access off North Heath Lane, with an area of hedging removed to the west, providing direct access into the front garden and parking area, so shown in that location. So again, the trees are subject to the tree preservation order, can be seen highlighted by the red stars. And it's in order to facilitate the proposed development, a number of existing trees on the site, but not the subject to the TPOs, will be removed, as will some soft landscaping. So the proposed dwelling would have a pitch roof design with a cat slide roof to the eastern roof slope and projecting elements to the side and rear elevations. The proposed design has taken its cues from neighbouring developments with a similar design and materials palette to be utilised, consisting of a tiled roof and facing brickwork to the ground floor and render to the first floor. Following officer concerns with regards to the design of the proposed dwelling, the scheme has been amended to remove a 3rd floor and therefore has reduced the overall height of the proposal. So the proposed dwelling would consist of a living room and dining room, kitchen, utility room and a snug or study, integral garage and WC facilities at ground floor level, and 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms at 1st floor level. So just taking you through some photos of the site. The top left-hand photo shows North Heath Close as viewed from North Heath Lane, and the application site is on the right-hand side in this kind of location. The top right-hand photo is Field Fair, so the host property, and the new dwelling would be located within the side garden area of that property. The bottom left-hand photo is taken from midway down North Heath Close, looking back towards North Heath Lane, and the application site is on the left-hand side of the road in that kind of location. And the bottom right-hand photo shows the approximate position of the access into the site. So these photos show the relationship with neighbouring properties. So the top photos show the relationship with Lady Mead to the east. The bottom left-hand photo shows the relationship with the properties to the north, which are on Goose Green Close. And the bottom right-hand photo shows the relationship with the host property, Field Fair. So North Horsham Parish Council has raised no objection to the proposal, but has raised concerns regarding the upkeep of the tree preservation order and also the parking of construction vehicles. Objections have been received from 5 households, which raise concerns in respect of the overdevelopment of the site, the proposal not being in keeping with the street scene, access and highway safety issues, loss of trees, landscaping and wildlife, and also the loss of privacy and general amenity for neighbouring properties. The Council's Agricultural Officer, West Sussex County Council Highways and Southern Water have raised no objection to the application, with our ecology consultant recommending conditions in respect of the development being carried out in accordance with the mitigation measures and biodiversity enhancements as detailed within the submitted back roost assessment. The site is located within the built-up area of Horsham, where the principle of residential development is considered acceptable subject to all other material considerations. The site is located within a wider area defined by relatively dense suburban residential development with a mix of detached, semi-detached and terrace properties. Officers consider that the proposed dwelling would be appropriately sited and would sit comfortably within the plot where appropriate distances would be retained to the side boundaries and adjoining properties. The materials ballot is considered to be in keeping with and relates sympathetically to the character of the private road, subject to a condition requiring exact details of the external materials to be submitted and approved. And it's noted that the properties within North Heath Close benefit from a mixture of materials to the external walls, ranging from including render, brick, tile hanging and cladding. Appropriate distances would be preserved to the neighbouring properties, and therefore officers consider that the proposed development would not result in any harmful overlooking, overbearing or overshadowing. The Council Arboricultural Officer has advised that trees present within the site are of no special or particular merit and are of no public amenity value. In respect of the hornbeam and silver birch, which are the subject to the TPO, it has been advised that the development will have some impact on the root protection area of these trees. However, it's not to a degree falling foul of the relevant guidelines, and that suitable ground protection measures are suggested within the submitted report, which provides comfort that the trees will not be harmed during the construction process. Given the constrained nature of the site, however, it's suggested that a condition is imposed requiring details of material storage and a working area during the construction works to be agreed, and this forms part of the suggested conditions. It's noted that objections have been raised with regard to the potential disruption and access issues during the construction phase, given the width of North Heath Close, and it is therefore recommended that a condition is included on any permission granted requiring the construction of submission of a construction management plan to enable control of issues such as the parking of vehicles and the storage of materials and equipment off North Heath Close. And therefore, in conclusion, the application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the officer's report and subject to conditions as set out at section 7. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much. We have two speakers on this item and they're both going to join us on Zoom. The first one is Mr. Graham Steele. Is Mr. Steele with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Good evening to you. Yes, we can hear you. You have
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Graham Steele. I own Ladymead in North Heath Close. North Heath Close is a perfect example of Horsham living and lifestyle. It's a symmetrical development of 6 properties dating back to the 1930s. These large character family houses on substantial plots provide almost total privacy from their surrounding neighbours, due to a large amount of established trees and bushes, which is abundant with wildlife such as nesting birds of numerous species, foxes, hedgehogs and bats. If this consent is approved, all of the above will be destroyed, which is in complete contradiction to the Horsham planning framework, which clearly states that the Horsham way of life should be protected. The first 4 properties in the close have always been mock Tudor in appearance until recently, when the applicant decided to change the appearance of his own property by removing the character without any consultation with the remaining neighbours, or I'm assuming planning department. No doubt this was to help facilitate this application, which is shoehorning a modern property not in keeping in appearance onto a site which is less than half the size of the adjoining sites, ruining the symmetry. The loss of a substantial amount of trees, not 5 as indicated in the arboreal report, replaced by a large expanse of concrete along the boundary fence of Ladymead, will be ugly and reduce privacy for us and the properties to the rear. None of the residents in our close or immediate neighbours want this development to proceed, and it is desperately unfair that the majority is not being listened to or consideration being given to their grievances. Do not turn what is a rare piece of Horsham lifestyle into an overdeveloped estate like those built around us and those being erected in Horsham at present. Finally, North Heath Close and the hedges on either side are owned by Ladymead, myself. The garden gate that is supposed to be the access to the site was illegally installed without my permission and is totally insufficient for access purposes for anything larger than a small hatchback. Deliveries in North Heath Lane, or North Heath Close, sorry, have to drive in and reverse back out to drop off food parcels. I would like to place on record that I will not be granting consent for my hedges to be destroyed further to permit construction traffic access, as the disruption to our close and day-to-day lives will be constant, stressful, inconvenient, noisy and dirty. And for these reasons and many more, this consent should not be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steele. Next speaker is Graham Hartley. When you're ready, Mr. Hartley. Is Mr. Hartley with us?
At the moment, you're muted, Mr. Hartley. I'll just unmute you for you. You'll have to unmute yourself, I'm afraid.
I've managed to do that. Can you hear me?
Yes, well done. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. My wife and I have resided at Heath Cottage in North Heath Close for 29 years. It is without doubt an idyllic setting, a green oasis in an otherwise highly developed area of North Horsham. And it's often referred to as one of Horsham's best kept secrets. Not even the taxi drivers know where it is. It comprises 6 properties built in the 1930s on a 1.5 acre site. You will, I hope, have read our detailed submissions objecting to this development, and without repeating them, I'd like to add a couple of points. The committee report refers several times to the existing modest size plots, which respectfully I suggest is most certainly not the case. When compared to adjacent developments, I would describe our plots as fairly substantial, although clearly squeezing in another property into Fieldfare's back garden will itself create 2 modest-sized plots, which will adversely impact the existing carefully constructed symmetry of the close. The recommendation carries with it 18 conditions, which in itself indicates this is not a straightforward application. North Heath Close is a private cul-de-sac, and consequently, a number of the conditions relating in particular to access cannot be complied with without the express approval of the occupier of Ladymead, who is the owner of the access road. He has clearly stated, and I think you heard him earlier, that this will not be forthcoming. North Heath Parish Council have correctly identified the problem associated with construction traffic, which we and the other residents believe is insurmountable, causing not only considerable disruption to us, but also potentially the large volume of traffic using North Heath Lane. You only need to look at the photos that were displayed earlier, I think, to appreciate this. So please help us preserve one of Horsham's best kept secrets and reject this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steele. As usual, we'll go back to the presenting officer to see if she'd like to answer any of those questions.
So just pick up on a couple of those points then. So it is acknowledged that North Heath Close is a narrow access. West Sussex County Council have advised that there's no recorded accidents at the access point with North Heath Lane, and there's no evidence to suggest that the addition of a single unit would cause any additional safety concerns, and have advised that sufficient parking is to be provided, and recommended condition 4 requires a submission and approval of a construction management plan to deal with issues such as parking of vehicles, storage of materials and equipment, to ensure that the road isn't blocked during construction works. I think it's worthwhile pointing out at this stage as well that land ownership issues are outside of planning control, and therefore if access isn't provided by the landowner, then obviously that potentially prevents the development going ahead, but that's outside of the outside of the control of planning. In terms of the loss of trees, the submitted tree report and the plan submitted, which has been to our agricultural officer, does suggest that 5 trees will just need to be removed within the site, and that these trees are of no special or particular merit and can be removed, and that the tree preservation order trees that are the most important and sit just outside of the site wouldn't be harmed if the relevant protection measures were put in place. In terms of wildlife, a daytime backward potential roost assessment has been provided, and the council's ecology consultant hasn't raised any objections to the proposal, subject to conditions to ensure that the relevant ecology and biodiversity mitigation measures enhancements are put in place. In terms of the overdevelopment of the site, as could be seen on the location plan, whilst the two properties at the eastern end of the close, so most close to North Heath Lane, is set within large plots, the majority of the other properties are set within smaller plots, although it's acknowledged that they are substantially bigger than kind of the plots on Goose Green Close. And it's considered that actually putting a property in this location, so in the side garden area, wouldn't result in the overdevelopment of the site, given the size of the plot that Field Fair has. And in terms of the property as proposed being out of keeping with those on North Heath Close, it is acknowledged that there is actually a range of property designs and materials within the close. While some are of kind of mock Tudor design, there is some bungalows at the end of the close, and it has been noted that they aren't of a mock Tudor design. So it's considered that the dwelling as proposed wouldn't be out of keeping with the cul-de-sac.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Peter Burgess first.
Oh, kind. I don't like it. Seems to me we're putting a development in for no other reason than profit. There's no other explanation I can see. It gives no other benefit. I certainly would like to turn this application down, but unfortunately I can't see a realistic planning objection which would stand up at appeal. What I would like to stress is, as per the parish council and other notes, is I'd like to see a very strong condition to regulate the parking of construction traffic on what, in my view, could be a relatively dangerous area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Christian Mitchell.
Chairman, I agree with Councillor Peter Burgess's concerns. I don't like it either, and I agree with the near neighbours and the other resident that has come to speak. I don't support it. I will be voting against the officer recommendation. I don't know if Councillor Burgess would support refusal seconding, or if there's another member of the committee, because I think it is overdevelopment. I do agree that it is a hidden gem and a best kept secret. I, in all honesty, only learned of it when I first started campaigning to be a district councillor in that seat, and I only learned about it when I was out on the pavement. And it is a joy, that little cul-de-sac. It's very well tucked behind North Heath Lane, and really reflects a small part of Old Horsham, because of course the development then came on from the 60s and 70s in North Heath, and then into what was then North Horsham, and of course now we have north of Horsham coming. And so to have this property shoehorned in to sit alongside this other property, the 1930s property, in what is such an idyllic little lane, is really unacceptable. The lane or the close really is much narrower than perhaps that photograph suggests. I'm not saying that it's some wide angle lens. The photograph indicates it's not particularly wide, but I can say from before having to go down there with Councillor Burgess or anyone else leafleting or door knocking, if I've ever tried to go down there, effectively it is the width of a car. So it is terribly narrow, but of course that's part of the closest charm. And of course that will be lost. So it is a small site, it's out of character. I thought that we had views and policies nationally and locally on garden grabbing. We have a tsunami of housing coming. I mean, that isn't an exaggeration. I think arguably it's an understatement to say we have a tsunami of housing coming. And so quite why we are needing to consider this, I don't know. So I think it is overdevelopment, and I will listen to what other members say and see if Councillor Burgess or anyone else does wish to second refusal. But those are my views. I think if we start still allowing these sort of garden grabbing, particularly when we have thousands of houses coming, we will just be left with very little of what's left of Old Horsham. So, Chairman, those really are my views and concerns. It's idyllic, and the house name's opposite, Rose Mullion opposite. I mean, it's the closest as beautiful as it sounds.
Thank you for that. I've got several. Amy, do you want to come back on this before I open it to the other public members?
Councillor Kitchen, we can come back at a later point. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Karen Burgess.
Thank you, Chairman. I echo the comments made by the two members for Holbrook West. It's a beautiful location, and quite frankly, they are putting a pint into a half-pint pot. It just about fits into that side garden. As Councillor Peter Burgess said, it's done purely for profit, for no other reason, I feel. And equally, as Councillor Mitchell has said, we are going to have thousands of houses, and one more in that location is really one too many. The added problem is going to be the access. It is extremely narrow, as Councillor Mitchell has said. And the other point that hasn't actually been raised is that it's very, very close to the mini roundabout and the turning for Coltsfoot Drive, which is a very busy road. There have been lots of near misses, and there have been a few crashes on the mini roundabout. And I think with the construction traffic blocking the road, which they would if they went in there, it's going to be a nightmare for the people who live there to try and get in and out. I do not support it, and I will not be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Tony Bradnam.
Thank you, Chairman. The points have really been covered, but it did concern me when I saw it because of garden grabbing. I thought the government had introduced legislation some time ago to stop that. And, you know, I understand what the planning officer says about the trees being of little or no consequence on the site, but of course they are of enormous value in the street scene and to wildlife, and it's no good keep grubbing out all these trees, hedgerows and all the rest of it, because we're supposed to be trying to protect wildlife. And so I don't think I could support it really, in all honesty, because I'm very much against all this filling in of gardens. And of course it sets a precedent for anyone else with a big garden around that way. And the other comment, I did notice that the planning officer said that there's not a great deal of traffic through there with deliveries, etc. Well, I would hesitate to say that, because of course, particularly with COVID, there are an awful lot of deliveries going on all the time, everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Andrew Baldwin.
Yeah, like what has been said, really. All I would say is there is overdevelopment here, and I shall definitely be voting against it.
Councillor David Skip.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I agree. I think this is overdevelopment, and I think it's an unsightly building anyway. And I think it does damage to the environment, and I think it's out of keeping with the other houses. I do have one question, which I'm not sure how this can be conditioned. Really, it's conditioned 18, which said this may include the appointment of an appropriate and competent person, an ecological clerk of works, to provide on-site ecological expertise during construction. I've never heard of one of these before, and I just wonder how easy it is to get an ecological clerk of works in something such as this. So I'd just be interested in whether these people do exist, but I certainly will be voting against this application. Thank you.
I see the head of development wants to come in, but before I do that, I'm going to ask Councillor Mitchell if he wants to do a contrary proposal, or whether you just want it to go to the vote and see if it's defeated. Either way, I think.
Well, Chairman, I think we'll. It probably is proper that we have a contrary motion, so that then there's no confusion that if it's lost on the main motion, that we wonder what to do then. So, I mean, I'm happy to defer to Councillor Peter Burgess. I don't need to stand on ceremony, so I mean, I'm happy to propose or second, unless Peter Burgess indicates otherwise. Otherwise, I will formally propose refusal on grounds of overdevelopment. And if Councillor Peter Burgess wishes to second, or anyone else, then I'm happy with that.
I think I'll just say, do I have a seconder?
Yes, you do. I will second that motion.
Councillor Burgess. Right, head of development next, please.
Thank you. Just to come back on a couple of points. In terms of, obviously, whether there's profit in something or not is not material to planning. In terms of the access itself, you will know as members that the bar in terms of highway safety is high, and that there has to be a severe impact on highway safety to raise concerns in that regard. We obviously have no objections from highways on this application, and the addition of one dwelling in most instances is unlikely to result in a severe impact. Obviously, I've listened to the debate in terms of members' concerns, and there's some comments made and a motion put forward in terms of overdevelopment. Obviously, officers are of the view that there are some plots within the close smaller than those at the front, and therefore the resultant plot here wouldn't be uncharacteristic. But bearing in mind members' comments on overdevelopment and the motion put forward, it has to be the case that members would need to identify some harm to refuse an application in terms of overdevelopment and the impact on the character of the area. And that may be something members wish to consider further. Obviously, officers of the view the application is acceptable, and our recommendation is put forward on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Christian Mitchell, before I take the vote, I'll ask you if you could give some reasons for refusal before we vote.
Chairman, whilst I don't disagree with the main officer's presentation and perhaps what the head of development just touched on, of course, at the end of the close, it's a little bit different because they are bungalows and they're more modern. But the street scene and the opening up of that close with Rose Mullion and how that's positioned and the property on the right does set the street scene. And the photograph that the officer showed with the narrow drive down sets the street scene. I think if it'd been the other way around, I think they're 70s bungalows. Anyway, they're more modern, more contemporary, post-war. If they were at the front, then I think that argument would hold weight. So the street scene and the character as you pass or certainly enter into the close is set by the property on the right and Rose Mullion on the left and the next two properties. So the harm is it's overdevelopment in the plot, and it changes the character and the street scene of the close.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Lindsay, I see you've put your hand up.
Yeah, just a point about trees. A large tree will absorb about 50, 60, 70 pounds of carbon dioxide a year. So cutting down 5 trees knocks out a fair bit of capacity for absorbing carbon dioxide from all the cars that drive around there.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to take the vote on the proposal to refuse now. So when you're all ready, and the reason for it.
Against.
When you're ready, can we take the vote, please?
Right, yes. So to refuse on grounds of overdevelopment and causing detrimental impact on the character of the street scene. Okay. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
For.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton. Councillor Burgess, Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
Abstain.
Councillor Cornell.
For.
Councillor Costin.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Landiu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Milne.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Skip.
For.
Councillor Stannard has to leave the meeting. Councillor Vickers.
Abstain.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Utan.
For.
So that was 20 votes for, 1 against and 2 abstentions. So the proposal to refuse the application has passed.
Thank you very much for that. Did you want any more? You've got the reasons for the refusal, have you?
Chairman, a point of order. I wouldn't want this to come back again to committee and there be any confusion. My personal view is that that vote is clear, but sometimes we've taken the contrary vote. So I just raised that because I wouldn't want this back at committee again.
Why not? I have to take legal advice on that, but I would have thought it was fairly clear. Can I have, is the monitoring officer still here? Or a member of the legal team? Yes.
Yes, Chairman. I believe that the Democratic Services Officer did make it clear that they were voting to go against, to refuse the planning application. And unless anyone can say otherwise, I believe that is the vote that was taken. Thank you, Chairman.
I must say that's how I see it. Are you happy with that, Councillor Mitchell?
I am, Chairman. There was a time some years ago and we still had to re-vote on the original tabled motion, but as Council Solicitor has advised us, then of course I accept that advice and I'm happy.
I have to say I think it's completely clear as it was, so that's fine. All right, so we'll now move on to agenda item 9. Again on this we have 2 speakers, but first of all we'll have the officer's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As members will recall, this application was previously heard at the meeting of Planning Committee North on 4th of August 2020, where members resolved to delegate approval to the Head of Development in consultation with the Chair, Vice Chair and local members, subject to the agreement of appropriate conditions. As a recap, the application seeks the change of use from a residential dwelling to a mixed-use purpose property comprising a residential unit and as a community meeting facility, along with the demolition of existing structures and the construction of a part single, part two-storey rear extension with associated internal alterations and a 2-storey meeting hall with glazed link from the proposed extension. Alterations to the existing access and proposed car parking also form part of the proposal. So following the August committee meeting, conditions to be attached to a grant of planning permission have now been drafted, with this application returning to Planning Committee North to confirm the reason for approval and appropriate conditions. The addendum as provided sets out a suggested reason for approval along with conditions and an informative which are considered necessary to mitigate against the impacts of the development. The suggested conditions take into account those suggested within the supporting documents which accompany the application, the inspector's considerations from the earlier appeal decision on the site and subsequent discussions with colleagues within the council. Members are asked to confirm the reasons for approval, informative and suggested conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go, the first 3 speakers are on video and the parish councillor will join us on Zoom. So I'll ask first Diane Mitchell if we could see your video, please.
My name is Diane Mitchell and I live at Daisy Cottage with my husband Jeremy. We fail to understand how this application was given the green light, given that the noise threat cannot be mitigated. One of the supporters in the last meeting talked of equality for minority groups, but surely equality is for all, including us at Daisy Cottage. Our lives did not matter when the committee voted in favour of this application, and we will suffer if this development is allowed on the recommended conditions. Our home is approximately 12 metres away from Stafford House. Noise will always be an issue and no scheme or noise management plan will work. You cannot reasonably expect the committee at Stafford House to monitor their own noise levels. They don't care how much noise they make, as evidenced over the past few years and recently backed up with an enforcement notice. We strongly object to the hours of operation proposed. They are ridiculous. 15.5 hours on each and every working day and 13 hours a day on weekends. How on earth do these excessive hours safeguard our amenities? In comparison, hours of operation at the Hindu temple at the Apple Tree Centre is only open from 8 till 1 and 4 till 9, and the Hindu temple in Bonnets Lane 8 till 12 and 4 till 8. No other organisation in the area has these excessive operating hours. My husband works on sociable hours. Lack of sleep is highly dangerous for him as a driver. He's not going to get any sleep if this development operates on these crazy hours. Environmental Health stated in the committee report that there should be a restriction on numbers attending of 80 delegates. We don't see this in the proposed conditions. In our opinion, it's still too many people and will not change the noise created by their attendance. They are a growing community, and with no control on numbers attending, this will create unprecedented levels of noise and disturbance. For us, it will cause a serious and unreasonable interference with the right to enjoy our own property, and it will be impossible for a noise abatement order to be enforced if this development goes ahead on the recommended conditions.
The next one here is Michelle Girling.
Hello, I'm Michelle Girling from I Own Daisy Cottage. I'd like to make the following points about the conditions on the planning that's been applied for at Stafford House. I objected on the grounds that I do not believe that there is capacity for 80 cars to be going into the property, and the disturbance that 80 cars will make. They will need to have a banksman to get that many cars in, which I believe will also create a lot more sound, people calling out and car doors slamming and general noise, people coming and going. And the hours that you've requested on the conditions now are not acceptable, not when people are living literally yards the other side of the fence, having to be disturbed by cars coming and going when they're trying to have a peaceful evening and get a good night's sleep. They're shift workers, and I think it's very excessive that the hours have now been increased to far beyond what has already been approved in nearby temples. And so these are the reasons why I think these should be curtailed to what I would class as reasonable hours. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next one, please.
My name is Dua, and today's agenda is to validate the conditions put forward by Horsham District Council. I thank the respected North Committee members for the previous efforts and support of the meeting held in August, which the planning permission for Stafford House was approved. Now, at the time of recording this video message, we are still waiting to hear from the Horsham District Council, reference the rewording for condition number 3 and number 4. Now, these two conditions relate to noise management, and we have already submitted a detailed noise report which includes noise mitigation measures, and we are not sure what information is still missing that warrants a condition being imposed on the noise management. The previously submitted report did confirm noise levels are below the recommended guidelines, so that is not an issue. In either case, we are more than happy to provide more than adequate provision that can be made and will be made available always. We are happy to work with the council to make sure the safe operation of Stafford House and meet the safety measures of building that of the nearby residents as well. Our managing committee of Stafford House, our trustees, chairman, are in full approval of all other conditions except that of number 3 and 4, as I've just previously explained. I understand that this has been a difficult year for all, some more than others, but this has definitely impacted us all in some way or other. However, a lot of time has lapsed since the last planning committee meeting, which was approved on the 4th of August, and we were hoping to draw matters to a conclusion by now. We hope this meeting has positive feedback and positive results that our Shire community can look forward to building our Shire community home together. Once again, I do thank the North Committee for their previous support, Horsham District Council and everyone who's had an input in this planning permission being improved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Councillor George Sellers, Rusper Parish Council, who's with us on Zoom. Good evening, George.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Rusper Parish Council has been objected to this development since its original proposal under DC 18-1584, and that was refused by Horsham District Council on a number of grounds. That went to appeal and was refused at appeal. The Parish Council is objecting on much of the reasons put forward so far. Firstly, that it's an unsuitable location for something like this along a narrow country lane without suitable lit footpaths or other easy access. So it poses a risk to both the users of the site and other road users, because they'll be turning in and out and trying to access this site. And also on the grounds of the noise and inconvenience that it will create in this rural location. The planning inspector for the original application, and there's no change in this new application, ruled it out on the grounds that there's that any mitigation measures are unlikely to be adhered to and are likely to be unenforceable. So any mitigation that was put forward, the inspector seemed to think would be there wouldn't be a way to enforce those or to make sure that they worked properly. He also said that there were unresolved issues with the noise survey assessment, and there's no new noise survey assessment has been produced against this new application or any of the measures that have been proposed. So there's no clear indication as to why this should be accepted under any terms. And therefore, the acceptance at the last meeting seemed to be on the basis that it was resolved to delegate the approval to the head of development, subject to the agreement of appropriate conditions. It seems to me that the conditions that have been put forward, the lack of any new noise survey and assessment, would mean that those conditions have not been met and could not be met, and therefore this application should be refused.
Right, thank you very much. I'd like to bring the planning officers in before the local members to make any comments on the speakers' comments. Amy, do you?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to come in now if that's okay. Obviously, as my colleague has pointed out, officers considered the conditions carefully in terms of the previous appeal decision, and officers of the review that the conditions as stated are robust and can seek to mitigate against the impacts of the development as far as possible. Obviously, subject to after this meeting, we can provide further guidance to the applicants in terms of details of a noise management plan as part of the discharge of that condition. Mention was made about a suggested condition relating to the number of occupiers of the building, and the reason why officers have not put that forward, because we just do not feel that such a condition is enforceable, and therefore it doesn't form part of the proposal before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Before I speak as the local member, I'm going to speak as chairman. And just to remind you that we're not going back over the old permission that was granted last time, and that we are talking about the conditions that are here on the that are here before us this evening. So if members could stick to that, I think we'll have a better debate. Unfortunately, Tony Hogben can't be here this evening, but he's left me with his comments, which are largely, he he would agree with the comments of the parish council, as do I, that I don't think these conditions, I mean, the hours of use, as was pointed out by one of the speakers, to me is just horrendous. And anything less than that, I think, would be difficult. But the hours of use that we've got down here, to me, are just, well, you almost don't have hours of use on that for the length of time they've got to work in the day. And I know, as usual, county aren't supporting us, but 80 cars going in and out of that particular Stafford House, which is an area I know well, I just don't think it's feasible at all. But I'd very much like to hear what other members say before I come in again at the end. Councillor Ruth Fletcher.
Thank you. I'm very concerned about this coming back to committee. There was a clear and, well, in August, the committee had a full opportunity to consider all the information and the arguments, and there was a clear and legally correct decision to overturn the recommendation for refusal. There was then a clear decision taken to grant planning permission. The material reason was discussed in the debate. It was recorded in the draft minutes. It was approved by members at the September committee meeting in approving the draft minutes. So all 25 members who were present in August, plus the officers, had an opportunity to raise the issue if they felt the minutes were misleading, but nobody did that. So the intention of the vote that was taken was absolutely clear. And the only problem was the lack of the reading out of the exact wording of the material reasons immediately prior to the vote. So as far as I can see, this vote should, the vote to grant planning permission is, it should be taken as a given. If we reopen that issue, the applicants are being put under double jeopardy. They've already made their case once, and then on a technicality, it's coming up and it's all being thrown open again. So normally after a decision is made, then if, you would go to an appeal or a judicial review according to the circumstances. So as far as I can see, the only debate should be about the conditions. And whether or not we're happy with them, whether they're reasonable and enforceable, and what the wording, whether we're happy with the wording.
I have made that point. If you'd like to finish, I'm then going to ask Sharon if she'll come in and explain to all the committee why this is back again. But do you want to finish now, or do you want?
Well, if I could just say that, as far as I can see, that it is absolutely inherent in the votes that we took in August that that the committee took a view, and that view should stand, that planning permission should be granted. So I was quite happy for the conditions to be delegated, and the people who are in charge of it may not be very happy with those conditions, but the responsibility is either at this committee or under delegation to come up with suitable conditions. But I'm very, very unhappy about any suggestion that we could possibly be reopening the case again. As the applicant suggested, there was a noise management report that was submitted right at the very beginning, and the applicant is still waiting to hear
on the recommendation that's before us, please. Okay, could I ask the monitoring officer to come in so all members are clear as to why this has come back?
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just go back to the, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. If I could go back to the previous planning committee where this vote was taken. At the time when the vote was taken, it was taken, and as we've already explained, and it's written out within the agenda, it was taken without formal reason for approval. We've gone back and listened to the minutes. So within the debate, reasons were given, but when it came to the formal vote, that detail was left out. And unfortunately, that was pushed to the reasons for the formal reasons for approving or approving the planning permission were pushed to the head of development as well as the conditions. So it was both of them. And those conditions alone are enough to bring that back to committee. There's enough detail to be discussed and determined that would allow this to come back to the committee. So what we have done, a suggested reason that has put together the comments that were made at the last planning committee, have been put and written and suggested on, I think it's at the bottom of page 55. And that's what we're asking this committee to consider. So it's that, and I don't know, Chairman, if it would be helpful for me to read that out, but it is also all of those conditions that are put, and it goes from condition 1 right the way down to condition, you see, get right down to the bottom, condition 15, and that's on the bottom of the top of page 58. So we've got 15 conditions there, and on the bottom of page 55, so the formal, what we are suggesting, and this is what we believe the intention of members at the previous planning committee, was that the benefits of development in providing a community facility for the Shia Muslim community are now considered to outweigh the harm identified when taking into consideration the amendments to the development and the mitigation proposed. So that's the formal suggestion that's been put here this evening, together with you considering those conditions. And again, as I say, we've got conditions 1 right the way down to 15. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, can I ask for a point of order, please?
Yes, Councillor Vickers.
Can the monitoring officer confirm that we cannot change the decision on this planning application? All we're looking at is the conditions. If the conditions are suitable, we will approve it. If we have concerns about the conditions, can we refuse it?
Yes, that's right. So if there are concerns about the conditions, and if there's a feeling that they are not satisfactory, then yes, you can vote against that. And I'll ask my also the planning solicitor to confirm that I've got that correct.
Planning solicitor, where are you?
Here I am. Yeah, sorry. Yes, I agree with the monitoring officer on that point. So, you know, really we need to debate the conditions and see where we get to after that. Sorry, could you hear me? Yes.
Yeah. So can we be clear, at the moment we're discussing the conditions that are written before us in the agenda this evening. And that's how it is at the moment. And I'll bring in other members now, but you're clear, I hope, on what we are discussing this evening. Right, Councillor Peter Burgess.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I might be a bit rude now, but I'm rather surprised Councillor Fletcher feels the need to defend the original decision, as has been made quite clear by the monitoring officer, the planning officer, and yourself. We're not in any way talking about that. We are not suggesting that we reopen the original approval, though I'll say personally I'd like to. The conditions put forward are what we're talking about. They're not satisfactory. You've heard from a number of local people, hours of operation, noise, etc. And in my view, we should reject this application and get much more reasonable conditions for the people who already live there. Thank you.
Councillor Tony Bradnam.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I don't want to go over old ground because, of course, we did all that in August. And I think perhaps the hours of operation do need looking at. I mean, they are quite excessive, although, of course, I do support the application anyway, as I supported it last time. I would dispute all this talk about the traffic because it's a decent bit of road along there. I also know it. Chairman, you're not the only person who knows that area well. And of course, a lot of people would be coming on foot because they're right next door in Langley Green. And I would have thought, as far as noise is concerned, why couldn't it be suggested that they have higher fencing than normal? We don't have to have a standard 6-foot fence, and you could have this noise inhibiting fencing. It could be higher and it could be noise inhibiting fencing. And coming back to the the wording put forward by officers, which I think is satisfactory, and thank you very much for doing that. I think because we were, well, I'm not quite sure why we didn't put forward proper reasons last time, but anyway, I wish to make an amendment to that, which actually beefs it up a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind, to the wording. Would I be allowed to do that, please?
Yeah, and I'd like to take legal advice on this because it's sensitive and I want to get it right.
Yeah, yes, if I could advise on that, it would be possible to make an amendment to
Sorry?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, it will be possible.
Yeah.
Could I read out what I think would be appropriate?
Yes.
It's a very minor change to that which the officers have put forward. And it reads, the benefits of the development in providing a community facility for the Shia Muslim community are now considered to outweigh the harm identified, taking into consideration Policy 42, Item 6 of the HDPF and amendments to the development and mitigation proposed. Because we do actually have a policy covering this, which is Policy 42, Item 6.
I'm actually, personally, I'm slightly confused now. Are you making an amendment to the...
Yes, I'm asking if I was proposing an amendment to the wording put forward by officers, for which I am grateful, but I wanted to bring in this extra line about taking into consideration Policy 42, Item 6 of the HDPF, because I think it's quite important.
Are you?
Because we do have a policy on this.
Right. That's an amendment to this recommendation today.
Well, it's an amendment to the wording, but in addition to that, I think we do need to look at the conditions, and I do think the hours could be a little excessive.
Can I ask, do you have a seconder for that?
I don't know, Madam Chairman. I have to wait and see if anybody would second it.
I see a hand waving. Looks like Councillor Bevis. Yes.
Yes, it was, Councillor.
We'll come back to that. I've got some more speakers, so I'll come back to that, Councillor Bradnam.
Okay, thank you.
In a moment. So it's the next one I've got down to speak is Councillor Claire Vickers.
Chairman, thank you. I'm not going to debate the benefits outweighing the harm of this development. That was all discussed last time. I'm just not comfortable that the conditions go far enough, and I think they need to be reasonable and enforceable. The hours are totally unacceptable in my view, and I think they will create significant impact. So I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Tricia Utan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I totally agree with Councillor Vickers. I'm not comfortable with the conditions and I simply cannot support them. Thank you.
Councillor Andrew Baldwin.
Yeah, Chairman, I agree with what Councillor Peter Burgess said, actually. I know we're not revisiting the decision, but I was surprised the way the decision was taken in August. But as regards what's in front of us now, I agree with Councillor Vickers and Utan. I'm not at all happy with the hours of use. They're far too wide, and if you were living next door to this, no wonder their life's going to be in misery. So I would totally reject the conditions proposed.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Chairman. I cannot understand how we've come up with what I would call fairly lenient conditions, which are stronger than the conditions not strong, no, not stronger. They are not as good as the conditions imposed elsewhere. The timings are crazy. I mean, I'm not sure how the neighbours could live with these long hours. It's madness. Now, if they condition other temples so that hours are less than that, isn't that what we should be doing here, is putting the same type of hours that others are already confined to? And why are we saying that we can't enforce these things? I mean, I believe that the numbers should be enforced. They've set a number and it must be enforceable, because I certainly want these people to have the right place to worship, but it just can't be there and all the neighbours are completely miserable with it. It just doesn't seem right. And I just don't know why we're not suggesting, right from the beginning, stronger conditions that would actually help them to, you know, have their services without disrupting everyone else. Something's not quite right. I don't know why we're too lenient on our conditions.
Councillor David Skip.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree. I can't understand this regulatory conditions 9. I think it really is excessive to expect a building such as this, with the use that's proposed, to be open for so long. I mean, it's virtually all day, every day. So I really can't support that at all. And if we're going to have equality, when you've got a temple down the road and another mosque with much less access and condition on time, then I think this is prohibitive. The other question I'd just like to ask is number 1, the preparation room, the ancillary body preparation room that is actually proposed, and the treatment for the storage and treatment of bodies. It's got to comply with Public Health England. I presume that there is or has been an application, and presumably this has been inspected. It will have to comply, I guess, with all the same regulations that undertakers have to comply with. And I would like to ensure that that's going to happen. Thank you.
Councillor Karen Burgess.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it seems to me that regulatory condition number 9 allows this to be 24/7 pretty much open. It's not acceptable for the people living in close proximity, and it should be much, much, much harsher. I'm sorry to say that, but it's got to be for the sake of the people living next door. Thank you.
Thank you. There's an awful lot in here at the moment. There are still others wanting to speak, but I'm going to bring in the head of development before I bring the other speakers in.
I just wanted to comment on some of the comments that have been raised in terms of the hours of operation. Clearly, in coming to those conditions, officers have considered the details submitted as part of the application, and obviously hours of use need to be balanced against the community benefit and the needs of the applicants, and obviously that's been considered in the hours of use. Saying that, it's obviously a decision for members in terms of what hours may be appropriate, and we can certainly review that condition. I would add as well that at this moment in time, whilst we may have had quoted the hours of that other facilities may open, that does not necessarily reflect the planning restrictions placed on those. And so at this moment in time, I don't think we can place due weight on that, but obviously the hours that we determine are acceptable is a decision that ultimately can rest with members.
The next speaker is Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand a lot of the comments members are making on this regulatory condition. I think it's probably worth bearing in mind that the reason they are the hours they are is because of the nature of what is being proposed here. I wouldn't want to offend the applicant, but I assume they would have prayer at sunrise and sunset throughout the year and that sort of thing. So that would make the condition useful. You know, I don't think it's proposed to be those hours without a proper reason, and I'm concerned that if we do try and change this condition, it kind of negates the purpose of this facility, and it doesn't really work as what it's being proposed.
Right, thank you. And the last speaker on this is Councillor Greening.
Thank you. It's a question for the officers. How does the operation timetable of this compare with other mosques in the area?
Have you got the answer to that? It's very difficult. I can't see who to look at.
Sorry, yeah, we don't have that information right now. Obviously, we would have to take a cue from some neighbouring facilities within Crawley, and that may be something that we can do. It may be the case that, subject to agreeing the reason for approval, we could delegate the conditions again with a view to consider the hours of operation condition with further discussions with local members and the applicants to see whether we can amend them. So that is a possibility that is open to members. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, I wouldn't. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now we've had sorry, Councillor Bradnam, you're saying no.
Well, no, sorry, I just wanted to come back quickly, if I may, Chairman, to say that whilst I am concerned about these hours of operation, I suspect it is to do with religious practice. I don't know. There is only one other mosque, I think, in Crawley, which is the Sunni Muslim mosque. The other, what we call mosques, are actually temples. They're not the same religion at all. And I was going to, you know, I have put forward an amendment to this wording, which has been sort of skipped over. There was something else I was going to say, which I've forgotten. Yes, I don't think members who were opposed to this at the beginning, I don't think we want to make the conditions so onerous as to not be able for them to not be able to run it, because it looks to me as if that could easily happen. So we need to be very careful here.
Well, you put forward your amendment and it was seconded. I think now we go to a vote. Correct?
Chairman, can I just ask that rather
you seconded it. Do you want to make a comment? Councillor
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, can we include the wording of that clause of policy 42, the specific needs of faith and other community groups, rather than burying it under a paragraph and subparagraph number? I think it just makes it easy to read.
Yes, I would think that would be acceptable.
Just so we know exactly what we're going to vote on, and I see there are still two speakers, but let's get this sorted first. Can you read out exactly what it is that we're being asked to vote on? Maybe I'll ask Liz from Democratic Services to, have you got it written down, Liz?
Well, my understanding is we're voting first of all, but the reasons for approval are as printed in the report, with an added reference to policy 42 item 6 with the specific wording of that item included.
Can we concentrate on the amendment put forward by Councillor Bradnam?
Yes, that's what I'm just saying. Yes, that's the reason for approval, with the added reference to policy 42 item 6 and the wording of that policy. And then I think when it comes to the conditions, are we voting that to delegate with a view to consider the hours of operation with further discussions with the local members and the applicant? I think this was suggested by the head of development.
The amendment at the moment, purely the amendment.
Just the amendment.
Yes.
Right.
For the benefit of those of us who aren't au fait with the National Planning Framework, what exactly is Policy 46, please? Could someone explain?
I can clarify that. In terms of policy 42, if I read the beginning part and then part 6, so it reads, positive measures which help create a socially inclusive and adaptable environment for a range of occupiers and users to meet their long-term needs will be encouraged and supported. Particular account will be taken of the need to address the requirements stemming from, and then there's a number of criteria, and criteria 6 is the specific needs of faith and other community groups. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just, before we move to a vote, ask for a clarification from the officers, please?
I would have said most certainly.
Thank you. I on condition 9, the hours, I'm trying to understand why we have got those conditions, given that, as my recollection was previously, that the hours that the applicant was asking for were not as extensive as the ones that are there currently in the conditions. So could we have an explanation as to how we've ended up with those conditions, because that seems to be what's causing a problem to people.
My understanding is they are the hours of operation put forward by the applicant. Thank you.
But the applicant was happy to have fewer hours than that, weren't they? I thought.
Not that I'm aware of, but obviously, you know, subject to the outcome today, that is a discussion that we can have.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the last blue hand I've got up, which I'll take now, is Councillor Haig, and then I want to draw this to a conclusion, unless there are points of clarification. Councillor Haig.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just trying to get a clearer picture of what we're voting for. So are we voting firstly for the amendment from Councillor Bradnam?
Yes.
And if that is carried, then are we voting for the conditions?
Yes.
And if it is,
clarify again, is that, can we do it that way? Sharon or?
Could I speak, Chair, please?
Yes, of course. Sorry, I wasn't sure which one I was going to answer. Yes.
We can vote for the whole thing, in that we can vote on with the amended reason, and vote also at the same time to delegate to the officers as to the conditions in consultation with the chair, vice chair and local members. I think that would work. I think if Sharon agrees with me on that one. Would you agree, Sharon?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, absolutely. So we could take one vote, and the vote is that we clarify, because as we said earlier, that was a formal suggestion in the in our agenda, and so we would make those changes that have been suggested and seconded, with a view to delegate the conditions, so we can take just one vote. And that can be done delegated to the head of development in consultation with the chair and the vice chair and those local members.
Can I come back on this, please?
Chairman, before we vote, can I just clarify these conditions? They would be verbatim in the minutes, would they? Because we at the moment we've discussed these conditions.
Yes.
Some people are unhappy with them and think they're too onerous, etc., and some people think they're too generous. When these conditions are settled, how will the rest of us be able to see it?
The conditions will be delegated to the officers. So they, at the moment, as the proposal stands, we wouldn't be bringing them back to committee unless head of development felt that she should do that. So if you wanted the conditions to come back to committee, we'd have to slightly change that to say, you know, we bring it back next time with further proposed conditions along with your amended, so in that case, I would then propose that we take your amendment separately, because then that would be got out of the way.
Well, I've no objection to the officers going back to sort out the conditions. I'm just wondering how the rest of us are going to see what those conditions are, that's all.
Thank you.
If I can interject, Councillor Braddon, and we can certainly send you a copy of the decision notice after the decision issued today, if indeed that's how it pans out. Thank you.
I'd like to make it clear from where I am too, as one of the 2 local members, whilst I voted against the decision that was saying, I have no intention of trying to turn this over. I know enough about the way planning works, and that was a decision of this committee. And as a local member, I'd like to see some of the conditions changed, but I'm not looking, as 1 or 2 people think, to have the original decision overturned. Apart from the fact I think it would be illegal, but just to do that. Okay,
Sorry, Chair, I had my hand raised.
Councillor Greening, yes.
Sorry, apologies. I just need clarification, please, because I support Councillor Bradnam's amendment, but I'm not happy with as voting as 1 to then delegate it under the times. So I think it was clear that we had an amendment put forward that was seconded, but I don't think we've had a second motion to be delegated. So can we just vote on it separately? So we just vote on Tony's amendment, and then we have a debate on regulatory condition 9, which seems to be the problem, because that's my main condition. Is I don't know how I would vote on something which I want to support Tony, but I don't support the other half of it.
Right.
Well, that would work, Chairman, as well. So if we did two
I must admit that was my original thinking, that we should do 2
Yes,
separate.
Chair, yeah, that's what I thought you were going towards, and I just didn't want you to be pushed off course.
No, all right, well, let's make a decision then. We'll take the 2 separately. Sorry about that, but I think that is the best way of dealing with it. So can we go for the vote, please?
Right, yes. So this is to vote to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the report, with an additional reference to policy 42 item 6 and the wording of that policy to be included in the approval reason. Okay.
And that is the amendment.
Yes, that's the amendment, just to add the reference to policy 42, because that's set out in the report otherwise.
So long as you're all clear on what you're voting for, let's take the vote then, please, Liz.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
Against.
Councillor Bevis.
For.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton.
For.
Councillor Karen Burgess.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Cornell.
Abstain.
Councillor Costin. Councillor Costin.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Landieu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Milne.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Skip.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
Against.
Councillor Utan.
Against.
So that's 17 in favour, 4 against and 2 abstentions. So the wording is agreed.
So we'll now go on to the next vote, which is to delegate with a view to reviewing the conditions, particularly the timings, to the 2 local members, to the vice chairman of this committee. And on this occasion, I'm actually going to ask whether we could ask Councillor Vickers to be brought in on the delegation of this, as I have 2 of the places, so to speak. Would that be acceptable to the committee? And I haven't asked you, Councillor Vickers, would you be happy? Sorry, would you do it?
I'd be happy to, Chairman.
Yes. So if that's all right, if I can add that in, can we now take a vote on that?
Okay, so I think, yeah, Councillor Kitchen's just said it, so I won't repeat it. for the delegation of conditions. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
For.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton.
For.
Councillor Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Roy Connell.
For.
Councillor Costin.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Kitchen. Councillor Kitchen.
Sorry, I'm on mute. For.
Thank you. Councillor Landiu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
Aye.
Councillor Milne.
That's illegal, Councillor Lindsay.
For. Yes.
Councillor Milne.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Skip. Councillor Skip. Councillor Vickers.
Abstain.
Councillor Utan.
Against.
Councillor Skip.
Yeah, 4.
4, thank you. So that's 19 for, 3 against and 1 abstention. So the motion to delegate the conditions has been passed.
Thank you very much for that. At this stage, I would have thought about taking a short break, but as the next 2 items are going to be taken as one, unless I see a lot of people saying they'd like a break, I think we'll go straight on, if that's all right with everybody. So agenda item 10 and 11 will be presented as one. The speakers will speak on both items at the same time, but we will have to take the vote separately. So if you're all right to go on with that, we'll go on with the last items on the agenda. All right, again, I'm not sure which planning officer is presenting this.
Just bear with me. Okay, thank you, Chair. So both DC 20-0937 and DC 20-0939 relate to Winterfold Farm off Wimlands Lane, Rusper. So DC 20-939 seeks to regulise the change of use of land to equestrian, along with equestrian development comprising stables, dog kennels, manure store, hay barn, lighting and mirrors to the sand school, a lunch pen, and the provision of a mobile home for a rural worker. And DC 20-0939 seeks consent to erect an undercover sand school, which would be in addition to the existing equestrian facilities on site. So Winterfold Farm is accessed off Wimlands Lane via a private track which leads to residential properties at Baldhorns Farm and Baldhorns Park Farm, located to the north of the application site, some 1 kilometre south of Rusper. So Baldhorn Park Farm was granted permission under DC 13-1452 to be used as a stud farm and equestrian holding. The shared access track also forms a public right-of-way with a further public right-of-way running east-west across the centre of the site, as can be seen by the light green line. The site at Winterfold Farm extends to some 9.7 hectares or 24 acres and is outlined in red. So since the completion of the stable block and sand school, which we were approved under DC 17-1841, a number of additional elements have been erected at the site without the benefit of formal approval, which 0937 seeks to regulise. An application DC 20-0939, the second application for consideration this evening, seeks consent to erect an undercover sand school and is marked by the red star on the aerial photo. While some of the unauthorised development can be seen in the aerial photo, the proposal before members includes in effect a reorganisation of the site to concentrate the majority of built structures within the northeastern corner of the site, along with a comprehensive landscaping scheme. So the next few slides that I'm going to present detail the proposed unauthorised works which seek to be regularised by 0937. So in terms of the stable building granted consent under DC 17/1841, the building was constructed closer to the northern site boundary than as approved. The building has been constructed in the location shown hatched, with the approved location shown in purple. The stand school, as can be seen, has been constructed almost as per the approved location. It should also be noted that a number of pre-commencement conditions attached to the 17 permission relating to drainage and the storage and removal of manure and bedding were also not discharged. So in terms of the unauthorised works to be removed or relocated, these include, but are not limited to, and I'll go through the various things highlighted on the plan, the use of the field south of the public right-of-way running across the middle of the site as a paddock, with the existing jumps and equestrian paraphernalia removed, the replacement of the existing metal gate with a timber gate more appropriate to the location, the removal of 3 shipping containers, which are seen in the orangey yellow colour along the northern boundary, the relocation of the hay barn from its current position to the south of the stable block to a new location to the west of the stable block along the northern boundary, the replacement of close-bordered fencing to the east side of the site boundary with a new fence and native hedge, the removal of a viewing gallery alongside the western side of the sand school, and the removal of lighting to the lunge pen. So in addition, the application also seeks to regularise the following elements. So going through the plan again, the use of the wider site for equestrian facilities and paddocks, dog kennels to the east of the stable, the siting of a mobile home to the southern side of the stable, which is currently used as a mess room but is proposed to be used as staff accommodation, a horse walker allowing 6 horses to be exercised at once, the installation of 6 CCTV cameras at the entrance to the site mounted on a 5-metre high pole, a manure store, a lunge pen, flood lighting and mirrors to the sand school, and paddock fencing and stallion pens. So in order to address the previous reasons for a refusal under 2019 applications, which related to the scale and bulk and nature of the development, the significant and prominent built form and the increase in activity on the site, the current scheme is accompanied by a site-wide landscape and visual appraisal, which sets out various new areas of planting to soften views of the site. Significant areas of new trees, native hedgerows and other planting, as can be seen on the plan, is proposed within the site, as can be seen, along with the replacement of some of the boundary fencing to reflect the more rural character of the area. So in terms of the proposed covered arena, which is the subject to the second application, the arena would allow a covered facility to be used during incremental weather, therefore avoiding the risk of injury to horse and rider. The structure would measure some 60 metres by 25 metres with a ridge height of some 7.8 metres. The building would have a fibre cement roof with translucent skylights, a green painted steel frame and an internal lower level arena surround. So just taking you through some site photos. So the top photo is taken from the bridleway running along the northern boundary of the site. So the roof of the stable building can just be glimpsed through the trees. The bottom left-hand photo shows an example of the paddock fencing that has been erected throughout the site. And the bottom right-hand photo shows the site as seen from the bridleway, again running through the northern boundary of the site, with the access track within the centre of the photo. And the siting of the proposed covered arena is marked by the red arrow. So the top photos show the paddock fencing, which has been installed either side of the public footpath that runs through the centre of the site. And both photos are taken from different points of their footpath. So it gives an example of the type of fencing that's been erected. The bottom left-hand photo shows an open field within the ownership of the applicant that currently has equestrian paraphernalia such as jumps on it, which are to be removed, and that field is to be used as a paddock only. And the bottom right-hand photo gives an example of the type of equestrian paraphernalia that's present on that site. So the top left-hand photo shows close bordered fencing that's been installed along the public footpath running across the centre of the site, with the right-hand side of the photo showing the field, or just giving glimpses of the field, which is to be used as a paddock. So that close bordered fencing is to be removed. The top right-hand photo shows the site, so the northeastern corner of the site, so where the majority of the built form is located from the public footpath, and the roof that can be seen is the roof of the stable building. The bottom photo again shows from the public footpath back towards the site, with the red arrow indicating the location of the proposed covered arena. So just going through some of the unauthorised work. So the top left-hand photo is the existing metal gate, which is to be replaced by a wooden gate. The top right-hand photo shows the hay barn, which is to be relocated from that position. And this area is proposed to be used for vehicle parking. And in the left-hand photo, left-hand side of the photo, you can just see the horse walker. The bottom left-hand photo shows the stallion pens that have been constructed. And the bottom right-hand photo shows the approved sand school with the stable building and hay barn in the background. So just some more photos. The top left-hand photo is of the, the top left-hand photo, sorry, is the horse walker with the hay barn on the right-hand side, which is to be relocated. And you can also see the mobile home there, which is to be repainted with more, I think they've described it as earth tonal colours, so browns and greens. The top right-hand photo shows the shipping, an example of a shipping container that's to be removed, and the hay barn is to be resited in that location. The bottom left-hand photo again shows the stable building, so that's the one that's been that previously got approval but has been repositioned. Or not built in the correct location. Also shows the mobile home and the horse walker. And then the bottom right-hand photo shows the viewing gallery that has been erected to the sand school, which is to be removed. And then just some more photos. The top left-hand photo shows the site of the proposed covered arena, which has been prepared, ready for construction, with the access to the site can just be seen in the right-hand side of the photo. The top right-hand photo shows the lunge pen with the red arrow indicating the location of the proposed covered arena. And the bottom left-hand photo again shows the lunge pen and the siting of the proposed indoor arena. And the bottom right-hand photo shows the lunge pen with the area of hardcore access, which leads up to the various paddocks and pens. So no objections have been raised by consultees such as the Council's landscape architect or drainage engineer in respect of both applications, and the Council's environmental health officer and agricultural consultant haven't raised any objections in respect of the application to regularise the unauthorised works. No objections have been received from West Sussex County Council, Highways, Thames Water or the Public Right-of-Way Officer at West Sussex County Council in respect of both applications. One letter of support has been received in respect of the application to regularise the unauthorised works. Rusborough Parish Council has objected to both applications and consider the proposal to represent an over-intensification of the site, with the covered arena considered to be out of scale with the area and the height of the building impacting on views from the public right-of-way. So when the council permitted the stable block for 14 horses and sand school in 2017, a new chapter of lawful equine use of the land was approved and subsequently commenced. The applicant has advised that the facility remains a privately run holding dedicated to the family's equine pursuits, with the applicant currently having 20 horses, including competition horses, brood mares and stallions, together with foals and young stock. The current application seeks to overcome the reasons for refusal cited under DC 19-0324 or 325, with a significant landscaping scheme included as part of this proposal. It is noted that the level of development on the site results in a sizable facility. However, it's accepted that equestrian facilities such as these are located within rural settings, and the applicant advises that such facilities are required to meet their family's needs for equestrian training facilities at a competitive level. In order to address the likely harm to the visual qualities of the area, there's been increased emphasis placed on new and increasing landscaping elements to the site, including the removal of a number of undesirable elements, such as the shipping containers and viewing gallery to the sand score. Furthermore, proposals include the relocation of the hay barn and replacement of boundary fencing to a more rustic style and external surface treatments to the mobile home. Many of these are intended to create visual improvements to the site and seek to mitigate the scale and bulk of the development when viewed, particularly from the public rights of way running through and adjacent to the site. In respect of the proposed covered arena, whilst public views of the arena will be visible from the public rights of way, there is a degree of undulation within the landscape which would reduce the overall resulting visual impact of the proposed arena from these public vantage points, along with the majority of structures within the northeastern corner of the site. And any views visible from the public rights of way running along the northern boundary of the site would be seen against the backdrop of the lawful development at the site and within the cluster of development in that corner, and also to a certain extent by the backdrop of the existing trees. In respect of the use of the unauthorised mobile home to provide staff accommodation, the Council's agricultural consultant has advised that there is a requirement for an experienced full-time rural worker to reside at Winterfold Farm to ensure the management and welfare of the applicant's privately owned horses. Therefore, both applications are recommended for approval for the reasons as set out in the officer's report and subject to the conditions as set out at section 7 of the report. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We have two speakers on this. The first one is Lucy Ralph, who is joining us on, who is the agent, who's joining us on video.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lucy Ralph and I am a director of AGM Limited who specialise in equestrian-based planning, and am acting as agent for the two applications for Winterfold Farm. I would first like to thank Nicola Pettifer, who has always made herself available for consultation throughout the pre-application and full application process. The proposals to regularise the additional facilities to those already permitted some 3 years ago, together with a proposal for a covered riding arena, all complement the existing private equestrian use by providing full training facilities for the Walker family. Concerns with previous applications were particularly based around landscape issues, and for both applications a full review and assessment of the landscape has been carried out as a whole. The results differ from previous applications and now provides extensive landscape mitigation, with various existing elements on site being removed or moved and areas of extensive native planting to help soften the views of the site, which the applicant has agreed to. Additional colour-coded drawings were produced to explain these changes, which I hope were helpful to you. The number of horses and the equestrian disciplines that they are involved in necessitates and dictates the size and use of the facilities. These are all commonly found at equestrian training yards. Each has a specific role and purpose to enable safe horse handling and training and are in line with the welfare standards and needs. There is also an element of employment at the site of equestrian staff to assist in the daily management of the yard. Mr. Walker's wife and 3 children ride and compete successfully in various equestrian disciplines. The whole family are passionate about their horses, and the children are dedicated riders who are eager to reach the highest levels of their riding abilities and aspirations. Your support of our applications to allow the family to continue and enjoy their riding careers will be very much appreciated, and I therefore ask you as a committee to support both in line with your officer's recommendations for approval. Thank you.
And the next speaker, who is joining us again on video, is George Sallows for Rusper Parish Council. Good evening again, George.
Good evening. Rusper Parish Council objects to both of these applications. The first one for the retrospective, on the basis that the Parish Council sees retrospective applications as something that should be highly discouraged. It leads to a sort of free-for-all within the countryside and the way things are happening. In itself, the scale of that development is not over significant, but it is an overdevelopment of that site, given that there is an equestrian facility right next door. It's a completely separate one at Baldhorns Farm. And we're seeing also that the argument for this facility as a whole in terms of the family needs is not a relevant planning reason. We have to look at this long term. If this is granted, then this facility is there for the foreseeable future, and it could be sold and potentially would be sold as the one next door is being at the moment, and could lead to further unsuitable development of the site. We've got a site at Sports Horse International on the Capel Road within the parish, again, which was a similar facility that is now being converted to housing. So we're seeing a sort of willy-nilly use of the countryside, leading to inappropriate developments in unsuitable locations. And the scale of this one is certainly out of keeping with the area. That the application for the covered riding area is even more horrendous, because we're going to see a virtually 8-metre tall building, and with the landscaping from the bridleway on the north leading uphill to this, it will be an over-towering feature of the landscape as viewed from the public right-of-way along the bridleway. I don't think any amount of landscaping can hide an 8-metre high building that's about 3 metres above your current ground level, and that's 30 metres by 50 metres. So the other thing was that the lighting that's proposed for this new indoor arena would be visible from the outside. It's a covered arena, and would be contrary to the Russell Parish Council's dark skies policy in this area, that is a significant area of dark sky for the benefit of people living in the area and for wildlife. So we're opposed to both of the applications on those grounds. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Amy, do you want to come back on any of the comments?
Officers are happy to answer questions, but we have nothing to come back on at this moment in time. Thank you.
Right, well, as the local member, then I'll come in first and say I find this a very, very difficult application. I know the site, I supported the first application, and it is absolutely superb. It's beautifully done wherever they've done the work, and I believe that the applicants will comply with the request to remove certain areas. And my basic view is, if you can't have horses in the countryside, where can you have them? But it is the size and scale of this that worries me. And on the first application, on number 10, the only area that I have a big concern about is the mobile home. I said at the very beginning, when this was first allowed, you won't be able to keep your horses here for long in this state without somebody to keep an eye on it. And I still believe that's true. So I'm not going to ask for the mobile home to be removed, but I was going to ask if we can have a time limit on it, so that the owner of this property, who doesn't live near it, can see if they can sort something else out, rather than having to convert a mobile home into a permanent building on the site. So I'll ask about that. And secondly, on the second application, I just cannot in any way support that. First of all, the size and scale of it is enormous, and Rusper itself, and I can't believe it's the only village, have a history of people building indoor schools. There are 2 actually in the village at the moment that are disused, and one is being used for storage, and as pointed out by the parish council, the other's going to have housing. And so I can't believe that for an indoor sand school that, well, I'm sorry, I just can't support that. And frankly, most people who ride out in the open anyway, so I don't believe it's necessary for all the training, although I think it's a convenience. So on number 11, I strongly oppose it. And on number 10, I'd just like to ask the officers whether there's any way that we can have a condition on the mobile home, which I'm fairly sure if we can't, we'll have other uses in a year or two.
Just to come back on the mobile home point, my view is you know, it is reasonable to impose a temporary limit on it, bearing in mind it is a reasonably newly established facility, and the mobile home in itself is not a kind of a permanent building. So if members were concerned, then I think it's reasonable to impose a temporary condition on it, such as 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Vickers.
Myself. Thank you, Chairman. I would be very happy to support your request to have a temporary permission on the mobile home. I'd also be quite happy to support your refusal on item 11. Second that, if you're going to make a formal proposal. I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Councillor Ruth Fletcher.
I appreciate that the buildings are being moved to reduce visual impact. I'm concerned that I saw no discussion of flood risk and the ecological value of the wildlife corridor next to the river, because things are ending up being put much closer to the river than they were before. And this is obviously a particularly important wildlife habitat. So I'd like to ask the officers for a comment on that. And the second thing is, I was interested to see the photographs of the public rights of way with the fencing on both sides. And this is having these penned in rights of way is an increasing problem locally with equestrian use. And it makes it very unpleasant for people who are walking, compared with having a free use of a right of way, and doesn't actually impinges on the people's sense of social safety as well as on their general enjoyment of the countryside. So I'm really concerned that we should use whatever measures we can to try to avoid this sort of fencing in of public rights of way, which frankly I think has a greater impact on public enjoyment than the visibility or not of you know, the mobile home being white rather than sort of muddy coloured. So I'd really like to see whether there is anything that can be done on that. Thank you.
Can I ask you to respond to that before I bring Councillor Bradnam in?
In terms of ecology, obviously it is an established equestrian enterprise, but if it was a concern of members, we can add a condition relating to an ecology mitigation and enhancement plan. Sorry, I missed the question about fencing. Could Councillor Fletcher just repeat that, please?
I'm asking really whether there is anything we can do to prevent this hemming in of the public rights of way that seems to be happening here, requiring or even requesting the applicant to move the fencing back further away from the rights of way, for example.
Okay. There's always obviously a balance between different users of the countryside, and I think whilst it is fencing it in, ultimately it's ensuring that the users of that public right of way are safe, and the horses and the users of those horses are safe. And so I think it's reasonable. Obviously what we want to ensure is that the fencing is of a design that's appropriate to the countryside, and that's why through our negotiations we've requested the removal of that close boarded fencing and requiring something more appropriate. Thank you.
I have to say I entirely agree with you, Councillor Fletcher. But when you're taking your dogs for a walk and there are herds of cows about to chase you, I quite like having a fence there sometimes. Councillor Tony Bradnam.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Chairman. And of course, as far as horses using public rights of way, I mean, each public right of way has its own definition. West Sussex County Council are in charge of footpaths and public rights of way, and some of them are boats, aren't they? Byways open to all traffic, so motorbikes can use them, horses can use them. They're not necessarily just public footpaths. As far as 6-foot fence is concerned, I think it does look awful. I agree, next to a public footpath. On the other hand, horses, of course, are extremely valuable, and if these are really serious equestrian people, which they appear to be, of course, they need to make sure that they are looked after. I mean, we do see, unfortunately, every now and again, spates of people, you know, doing ghastly things to horses out in the fields. And the indoor arena, of course, is necessary if they do dressage, because dressage is usually conducted indoors, and certainly the practicing for it is. I'm not really au fait with horses, except they've got a lot of teeth and feet. But you know, I think they do need an indoor arena for if they do dressage. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Tricia, your turn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I just say that the fact that they need an indoor arena is completely understandable, because if they are competing in any shape or form, then they have to have an indoor arena, and I see no problem with that. I understand the concerns about the mobile home, but I equally understand the need, in fact the necessity, to have somebody on site to care for these valuable animals. And as Councillor Bradham's just said, you know, regretfully, things do happen to horses. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that the proposals are eminently reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, well, we'll come to the vote now, because I see no more hands up. We'll vote. Remember, we're voting on item 10 first, and I've asked for a condition to be put in on the length of time that the mobile home is there, which I believe was said that
2 years.
Could be
2 years.
2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can we include that in the vote? Are you? I'm sorry, it's hopeless here. I can't see who's talking. Emma, it was you, I believe, who advised?
Yes, I just seek some legal advice, but my view is it may be best to come forward as an alternative motion in terms of that particular condition. But if I could just have the advice from my legal colleagues, please.
They've probably gone after the last one.
Have you finished? No, we haven't gone. Emma, please, could you clarify what you're concerned about? I'm not sure.
A proposal's been put forward by the chairman in terms of an additional condition relating to a temporary use for the mobile home. The question is, can we just add that to the recommendation as printed, or do we need an alternative motion put forward to add that condition? Thank you.
Oh, I would advise we do the alternative motion and have that seconded, please.
Councillor Vickers has seconded that.
Oh yes.
Do we need a vote, or can it just be included?
You will now need to go to a vote on that alternative motion.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, Liz, you've got to keep going. So we're voting on a temporary condition on the mobile home.
Just on that.
Of 2 years.
No. So you would vote on the recommendation as printed, the conditions, and the additional condition relating to the temporariness of the mobile home.
Okay, so we can use it. We can do it as one vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's fine. I thought you were suggesting a second.
Yeah.
Very confusing.
No.
You keep moving around on my screen. You're never in the same place.
So, Chairman, if this vote is carried, then we're done.
Right. Okay. Right. Can you start the vote, please?
Yes. Okay. To approve planning permission subject to conditions with the additional condition about the time limit. Okay. Councillor Allen.
Abstain.
Councillor Baldwin.
Agree.
4, yes. Councillor Bedlis.
4.
Councillor Bradnam.
4.
Councillor Britton.
4.
Councillor Karen Burgess.
4.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
4.
Councillor Cornell.
4.
Councillor Costin. Councillor Costin. Councillor Fletcher.
Abstain.
Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Landiu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Milne.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Skip.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Utan.
For.
Councillor Costin. Councillor Ritchie. Okay, so that was 19 for, 1 against and 2 abstentions. So the motion's carried.
Right, thank you for that. Now we'll take the vote on item 11. I have proposed that we refuse this on the grounds of the size and scale of it and the unsuitability of it on the site that it's in. And I think, Councillor Vickers, do you wish to say anything?
I'm happy to second that proposal, Chairman.
So we'll take a vote on item 11 for refusing this application. I don't know.
Are we going to have the harm and all the rest of it?
I had hoped that size and scale would come into that, but if that's not enough, I'm very happy for people to add things. Let me take advice from Emma, if you're there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My understanding of your concerns are essentially that the application doesn't address the previous reason for refusal on the application in 2019, and that reason for refusal was the scale and bulk of the proposed covered riding arena would lead to a significant and visually overbearing built form and intensification of sporadic development, a level of activity in the countryside. Essentially, as you said, it's the scale and bulk of the proposed covered riding arena and the resultant impact that would have on the countryside. Thank you.
Yes. Are you clear on that? Yes. Okay. So can we go ahead? I think this will be the last one you'll have, Liz.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So we're clear. We're voting on the reason for refusal. As Emma just said, for the scale and size of the arena and its impact. But the wording that Emma said. Okay. So this is for the refusal. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
Against.
Councillor Bradnam.
Against.
Councillor Britton. Councillor Britton. Councillor Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Cornell. Councillor Cornell.
Gone to the pub.
Councillor Costin.
Abstention.
Sorry, was that Councillor Cornell abstaining?
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. Councillor Costin. Councillor Costin? So I didn't hear that. I'll come back to you, Councillor Costin. Councillor Fletcher.
Abstain.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Landiu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Milne.
Abstain.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Potter.
Abstain.
Councillor Ritchie. Sorry, I think Councillor Ritchie's microphone wasn't working before. He was getting a message. Councillor Skip.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Utan.
Against.
Councillor Britton. No. Councillor Costin. No, I think we've lost them, but it's quite clear actually. The number voting in favour of the resolution to refuse is 13. Those against was 3 and abstentions were 4. So the motion to refuse is carried.
Well, thank you very much for that. And there were no other, I don't think, important business. So I think that's the end of this evening's meeting. And thank you all very much indeed for that. And remember that we're still live streaming for a few moments. So before you go, good night.
Good night, Liz.